Going live.
And
We are.
our,
Holy crap!
our
There's a lot of
oh,
chat already. Already. Hi, Estella. Peanut Gallery represent. So,
yo,
Spencer, actually, I forgot to talk to you about this before the show.
oh, excellent.
Uh, yeah. You know, when I first approached Spencer about doing the show, he had concerns about us blowing up too big and us becoming too well known. And
Oh, I did actually.
I have bad news.
Oh, what,
We're almost at 250 subscribers, and the train is going down the tracks, my friend.
dude?
So,
But if we become influencers, then people will look into my past, and that's not an okay thing.
no, well, all right, I didn't say influencers. I think that's a bit much. But we do have a guest who I consider an influencer. I
I,
consider,
I I am influenced by him.
yeah, I think a lot of us are. And I consider him one of the unsung heroes of XR, if I
One
may.
of the granddaddies.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
if I
or at
may.
least, creepy uncle.
Definitely creepy uncle. So let's bring him in. There he is. He's
Hey,
you stay
Hello.
you stayed quiet that whole time.
I know
I
you
was
were
trying.
really quiet.
I was biting my tongue for sure.
Hey, our friend Barb's here. Yay, Barb.
Hi, Barb.
I still want to have Barb on the show to just ask like the most rudimentary XR questions and have us answer them. So Bob, hi.
Hi, Paul.
You're in Maryland. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
So we have often talked about when we have a guest on the show how we know our guest. And that's going to be really awkward when we have a guest we don't really know or have a backstory. But my backstory with Bob, I teased this a little bit on Twitter. My backstory with Bob was I I saw some of his videos, which we have and we're going to show. Actually, maybe I should go ahead and show. So I saw this video. Let me switch over. Not that. That's Surge. That's something else. I saw one of these videos. I'll go full screen. Hopefully that does well for everybody. So I will skip ahead a little bit. This was one of the first like mobile phone AR videos I saw, and it's using an SDK or a library called String. Look at that old ass tablet. And
iPad
like,
too.
yeah, and so like just super polished, which is going to be a consistent theme throughout this show. And a dragon flying through a hole in the wall, and you can kind of look in the hole. Like it was already experimenting with like things beyond like, oh, once we can put a virtual 3D thing in the room, what kind of interesting
Right.
things can we do with that? And then another one was, I'll
Oh
tell you,
man, Bob, I bet you were just like smacking your forehead when Dr. G started doing the vistas beyond the hole. You were like, oh,
It's such a great technique, though. It's such a fantastic technique.
yeah.
this one was, and so the funny tell about a string demo is the image track. The image markers have these really thick black borders around them, but they are full color images. And so this made me like really get into string as a SDK and what was ahead of its time. And I've talked about this before, but string didn't require you to prepare crazy image targets and upload them to the cloud and use some crazy you literally in Unity gave string a PNG or a texture and said, I want to track this image, and it would just do it. Like, in fact, Spencer's, I don't know if you remember this, but Spencer and I did a project for a toy company where they were doing kind of impulse buy games, and they wanted digital experiences to go with these little toys. And one of the toys was like a little was interchangeable gun parts, and you could put a different custom gun together and then and what they wanted it to do is when you put a custom gun together, you point your phone at it and play a video game with the gun. And I used string because it was such a robust tracker. I could actually track 3D parts based off pictures of the parts, and like as long as the lighting conditions were, and we did a whole working proof of concept of that. And so like, was string kind of your first in like
Yeah.
entree into AR? And that was with
Yeah,
Bully, right?
yeah, it was Bully Entertainment. Yeah, it was before. So I mean, I guess Vuforia and String started kind of at the same time, but String had an Android side way earlier than Vuforia did. So it was kind of like the go-to for getting cross-platform support for that, or cross-device rather. And it's funny you mentioned about the tracking on it. I mean, it was tremendous. I mean, like even when the marker was extremely small, it would grab
Yeah.
it and hold on like glue, and it even ran on like a 3GS or an iPhone 1, I believe. I mean, like they did an amazing job on that code base.
Yeah.
Alan and I can't remember the other guy's name at this point. Yeah, Johan, I believe, but they did fantastic work on that library. And yeah, so that Pharaoh's Fury thing, we actually put that together at Bully for a initial like press release of String and a couple other things with the iPad. And we actually made that game in 1 week. It was the first
Oh,
game
really?
I kind of threw together as an actual game.
Well,
Yeah.
it's really cool. I mean, for like kind of a game jam, putting it together, that's great.
And was it? I thought it was. I mean, you were basically charged with building demos for String. Was this with? Was this? Were you just using String, or was this a project with String?
It was this project with String. We became
Okay.
partners with them, so they helped us get, projects and demos that needed to be done, and it helped them, flex what they were trying to get done. And it was a good source of revenue for us to get these projects done. And the cool thing was, you mentioned about the polish thing. Like the thing I've always tried to strive to do in all of my work is get past the technical and get to the story and get to like the heart of something. So like it's AR,
Right.
cool, it's gimmicky, but get right past the gimmicky. In fact, my focus for that Pharaoh's Fury game was to make sure there was a need for the actual AR. Like it wasn't just because it was a screen-based game in AR. You had to aim around to match the color of the pedestal with the color of the enemies, what he was using to attack you with. So you actually had to use the AR. So it's always been my push on that, is to make it useful and just get past the tech and make it a story as soon as you possibly can.
Well, and yeah,
Right.
like that's a real subtle thing that it's worth going back to the video for. Oh, let me switch back over because, like these are just real subtle things people wouldn't even think about. But like if you see this setup, they're pointing the device in the real world, but watch as you walk around the pedestal, you'll notice you see the walls, and it always looks like you're looking into a room. But even as you walk around, and you're like, basically the walls aren't rendering on the backside. So when you're focused in the gameplay, you feel like you're in the room, yet you can fully walk around this little box. And like, this is one of these things that's just not possible through any other type of interaction or presentation. And it's just I mean, like that was one thing that always impressed me about the String demos, was like the portal in the wall, or the other thing you did. I think you were one of the first people I saw that like, made a box appear to be in the ground, right? Like kind of used occluders and stuff like that.
Yep.
And it just like all this stuff. And I mean, this was when 2010.
Yeah, I mean, I put together a video. It's actually on my YouTube page, and it was part of a bigger blog post. But I went through all the techniques I come up with, like real-world occlusions and color matching to the light in the room. I mean, that was in 2010. I mean, like that was tons of time ago.
Yeah, I mean, definitely worth going to like just search for pixel placement YouTube. I mean, we're gonna go through some other stuff, but there's just tons and tons of stuff on there, and it was always just. So one thing we talked about with Anastasia last week was we were talking about audio, and I brought you up, and I was like, I can always tell a Berkebile Unity project because of how neatly it's laid out, and I can always tell. I don't think you've ever put out even an internal company video that didn't have like a soundtrack to it. It's just like, because it always adds that little layer of gloss. Like it's just like, it's almost like you can't help but make something that just looks commercial. Like it's hard to explain your sense of aesthetic. It always just looks like professional, and like I think you do it accidentally, and it makes me mad. And I think it's annoying. That's what
I think what happens is I'm both left brain and right brain, and one on the other side's going to get a little bit, bored if I'm not hitting both of them. So I try to make sure, I can get this polish and the details on there as soon as possible. But yeah, so I like balancing it.
So then, go ahead.
So you always put audio on it. Do you ever get takedown notices from putting somebody else's audio on your stuff, or I mean, how do you? Because all your stuff is really, aurally kind of interesting, and some of the stuff I've heard before. So like, You know, is Def Leppard ever like, you know, flip you an
Well,
email?
I have this weird way of like being able to match color to audio. Like it's really weird. I can always feel a different color and tone and temperature to audio when I'm matching things up together. But I think it's funny. I have such a random collection of music that I listen to that are like, you know, underground, really weird remixes, whatever else. And it's so obscure that none of the YouTube trackers catch it whenever they're combing through, because it's like not popular, so it's not in any kind of database anywhere. So I luck out that way.
Right. So it's not on anyone's top 40 database. Right. Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't hurt that
Nice.
Bob has a history of wearing tight velvet shirts and being a DJ at some point in his life.
Oh gosh.
I know things.
We all have a past,
Yeah.
Paul.
Back to the past. So like,
Oh gosh.
so no, this is so that's how I first kind of knew. I saw the string stuff. Spencer and I were doing a couple of string projects, and those were
actually,
definitely
real quick,
inspirational.
Real quick, I want to just go from. I know we're going to go into iTween and Surge and stuff like that, but I want to
Spoilers, but
quick,
go ahead.
Spoiler. Hey, we used Euphoria when we did our mock-up, our magic mirror mock-up, and I think the reason we did that is that String had priced itself out of Reason.
No, String.
Really,
No, String, sort of.
There's a couple parts of this story.
Yeah, so when we were using String, their Android version was still kind of like beta, not really. And I they were very responsive over it. We tried to get their Android version, and they're like, yeah, maybe we don't. And then they were pricing it really high, and I think because they didn't want to support it. And then
Right.
String's still around. String didn't go away, but they pulled the SDK down. I think they figured out, as a lot of people have including myself, learned the hard way, an SDK is not a very good business model. And they wound up just making experiences with their proprietary tech. When we first got Torch off the ground, I wound up talking to Paul there, and like we had a nice little chat. They put me in there. They had like an active Slack. Like, are you in there, Bob? They had like a private it was like, I was like, wow, I can't believe 10 years later they're still kicking. But they totally pivoted to like, they built like some AR. I don't
It was
think
a paint. It was a
Sherwin
paint
Williams.
program.
Yeah.
You could change the paint colors.
They did the
like
Sherwin
way
Williams
before
thing.
that was even a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're like just crazy computer vision people that aren't trying to do this like big startup thing. They're just like making cool stuff. They are in Europe, like the
Yeah. And
Right.
fantastic guys. They were just outstanding guys. But I just want to
yeah.
we'll jump real quick on that. So the requirement for String was the black border, which would help the computer vision to distinguish where the pieces
Right.
of the image are. But what made Vuforia really slick was that it had partial tracker occlusion. It was the first solution that did that. So what that means was that you could get either very close on the marker, or like you could kind of block your hand on parts of it. Basically, it was more robust because it could find and lock on to the tracking with a limited number of features, right? Whereas String needed the entire image, which isn't bad, but it's just it's more flexible one way or the other. The cool thing about Vuforia too was they kind of played on their strengths with that partial occlusion tracking, where you could have virtual buttons where you could actually occlude a specific spot of the actual marker, and that would trigger an event. So you could almost make like virtual buttons on the actual piece of paper. So it was kind of cool.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. String. That was like you had to figure out you had to figure out how to deal with the images lost and do like some sort of like extra work to get to tell people, or I think we did some hacky stuff with like maybe reading the accelerometer for a little longer and trying to keep it around, but it would just get lost. But
Yep.
old days. So then. As Spencer and I continued to work on projects and Unity projects, we obviously came across, what do you call it, Bob? What would you like people to know it as?
The STD of my career. Now, before you even start to talk, this was the very first thing I did in C#. So a little bit more backstory. I was a Flash developer for a very long time, doing Flash games and, interactive advertising experiences and all that kind of stuff. And then, Apple started to kind of put a death threat on Flash and all that kind of stuff. So my bread and butter was going away. So saw Unity and was like, let's give this a try. This might be something good because it has a lot of devices it hits and everything else. So I needed a way to tween like I did in Flash. So this was me learning C# and building a tool that I needed that I decided to give away for free. So
I thought iTween started in JavaScript or Booscript. Was it?
It was in JavaScript, yeah. But when I ported it over, it's the first thing I did in C#.
It's the first. It is your. So did you purposely leave this wet look, like early 2000s styling, just to repulse people away from trying to use it anymore?
I haven't touched the code base or this site.
This web page.
2012.
But it's still the funny thing. You can't get people to stop using it, and like,
oh
okay,
my gosh, it gets 300 downloads a month.
We used it
on a couple of the Monterey Bay Aquarium projects, right?
Yeah. Totally.
For like simple stuff, it's okay, but like if you really abuse it, the garbage collection in this thing is just woohoo.
But Spencer has talked many times now about Floaty Spinny, which is a little tiny script I made for him to make things spin around and hover, and I've since open sourced it as a 10-line C# file.
Floaty Spinny forever.
But like this is Floaty Spinny on steroids, right? You kind of identified the need for when you're doing a lot of this interactive 3D stuff, really any interactive, but especially in 3D, like people want to have these slick, smooth movements and transitions, and they don't want to have to write all this stuff from scratch. And there's like, different curves, like all these things that like, it kind of became a grab bag of like Bob's utilities, right? Some stuff's totally related, but there's all kinds of stuff in here. Like, I mean,
so hold on. You are right now giving Bob more of his old STD. Shouldn't we be?
No. Well, I want to talk about. I want to talk about how powerful. I want to build up to like how. Yeah. When you see repeated patterns of things you're doing, and then you package it up in a way that's like how powerful that can be, like I bet none of us could even guess how many Unity projects are still out in the wild or were built using iTween. Like, it's insane, right? Like, you have no way of knowing really, because it's also worth mentioning you put this out pre-Asset Store. Yeah. Like, so like you might be able to track downloads now, but I mean, who knows? Thousands and thousands of projects. People made literally millions of dollars exchanged on the top of iTween.
Speaking of that, if you go to the Minecraft website and go to credits.
Really? Nice.
Oh, yeah?
iTween is in there. So, yeah. I have helped make a lot of people more money.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nuts. Look, you even have the old-ass Twitter icon. Look at that.
I told you, I haven't touched this in forever.
But then, so I was originally when I heard about Surge. So now we're gonna bring it into the modern age. We've got your Surge toolkit. Now this has been touched. This is recent. But like, how do you? What is the mapping between Surge and iTween? Is there, or like?
Yeah. So if you go into documentation, so the only thing that's kind of a 1-to-1-ish is tween, which is basically another single line callable tweening system. And it has all the same functionality, but so iTween used a hash table, which is just god awful. And this is an actual object-oriented call and better API setup and everything else. Because at this point, I can't rip out the hash table setup or hash key pairs that are in iTween because it would just destroy everybody. But this is kind of the same kind of thing. So all things I learned from that library, like what kind of callbacks you need, looping sort of things. I even went a little bit more flexible with this because now you can actually use inspector or saved animation curves that Unity provides, so that way you can make your own easing on the fly. So this is just a lot more flexible.
But see,
so, Bob, what does Surge cost?
It is free as well.
Yeah. Bob's just a good guy most of the time.
He's a good guy. No, he's a good guy.
So like, I just wanted to point out, like, even like this really simple example here, this cube, like just for people that maybe don't know exactly, like this actually just ties into the Bobness of this whole conversation. Like when you see this cube spin, I just want people to notice like it slows down to a stop, and that is that polish that I'm talking about. Like there's so many ways you could spin this cube. You could do it just linearly. You could say add X degrees per second, or you could hand build an animation. but like there's just something extra, like just it's that much more slick.
And as a designer, I'm seeing the AO around it.
Right, yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
And the slight vignette.
The vignette.
On the
Yeah.
background,
The presentation of the presentation is
amazing. Yeah.
And the color scheme of the animation matches the rest of the color scheme of the entire suite.
Right. Exactly.
But so here's a question. Even take this animation here. You're showing like there's your slick vignetted cube, and you're showing these different curve type. Like to present this, to capture this animation, to have the curve overlaid, like does that just come easy and natural for you, or do you really sweat this stuff? Did you like work on building this GIF like for a day, or did you like or did you just like everything I touch turns to glass and it looks slick and here it is. I'm just gonna throw it up there.
Okay, well the entire documentation of the surge was done in one day, so it's.
I hate you.
But here's the thing. Wait. Here's
God,
the thing.
I hate you.
Hang on.
B.
I didn't go to school for this stuff, right? I dropped out of college and I taught myself programming and art. So I did so much copying and reproducing and duplicating things to learn and to understand how it's built and and the visual language of it, that like now it's just like second nature. So like I've ripped off so many things over the years to learn. Now it's just like, oh, I can throw it together. Oh, take a look at the show the spline stuff. That's my favorite part of Surge.
Well, like even the screenshot, like just there's a little bit of perspective on the, it's like, come on, man, you're ridiculous. What'd you say? Spline.
Yeah, this is my favorite.
Oh yeah, here. Well, I've sent Bob a lot of messages because I've used spline quite a bit, and that's the other piece of this too. I think it's interesting that you evolved from building like functional little bits of code, little components people can use, to like, especially spline, like there's just as much editor scripting as there is like runtime scripting here. I mean, you've custom built gizmos and all this visualization is in the editor. This, like, just so people know what we're talking about, this is the visual representation of your spline in the editor. This is not in the app that you're building with it. And then you can do whatever you want with the spline that you've created. I mean, you can put particles on it. You can have a cube travel along the path. You know what I mean? Like, it's really cool. And like, so how much of it still is you? I have to imagine, so maybe this is the wrong assumption. I have to imagine a lot of this stuff you've built out of necessity, like, oh, I want to have a particle system swirl along a controlled path for a specific project. Oh crap, I'm going to have to build it. And then how much of it is like, at this point, you're just like adding functionality to the toolkit?
Yeah.
Well, and I got to say that just that right there would require me to go in and start using all of the physics that mess with the particle system, and that is a monster amount of control. And being able to just like say, I want it to do this and then disperse. I can, that's a fantastic example of why you would want to use this instead of using operators like the like turbulence and whirlwind and all that stuff.
Yeah. So So what I try to do is I have noticed that over my career, I hate when people get bogged down in the how. Like when I was running things, helping run things at Bully, I hated when like people spent time learning an SDK or figuring out how to try to work with a new piece of hardware or whatever else. So I always try to get way ahead of everybody else in the office, learn it, package up in a nice little tool, and give it to them. Because like the sooner people can start making stories and making art and bringing emotion out of people with things, the better. Like, so that's why I give these things away, because I want people to worry about on what they want to make, not how they're going to make it. And that's kind of always been my thing.
Which is a perfect segue into me stalking Bob.
Uh-oh.
So I started at Magic Leap, and I think in an early episode we told the story about how the SDK that I was first exposed to at Magic Leap was not an SDK, and and we made a real strong point. We being Spencer, myself, Josh Faust, who maybe is in the chat, of like how important these tools are for these crazy new interactions, crazy new things. And so we had kind of won that opportunity and made that case internally for, okay, yes, we need to invest in an SDK. We need to invest in an app ecosystem. And the first thing that popped in my head was like, we really need someone pushing it, like making demos, making examples, and really telling us if it's good to use. And so Bob just kept coming into my head. And I honestly, I probably should have looked in old emails or something to figure out how this conversation even came to be. But I got it in my head because of Bob's like just like his inherent ability to polish and package and present. I was like, he's going to both tell us if the SDK is on the right track as a content developer that's been working in this longer than anybody else I know. Like 2010, he's been already doing like stuff people still aren't doing today. And then he's also going to tell us, I wanted some of the Bob glitter to fall off into the SDK basically. And so I kind of
glitter.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like an XR stripper. So I wanted, I came, we kind of came up with this role. Did we work together on that? We made up a role basically.
You came up with it.
You
were like, how does this sound? I was like, oh, that's perfect.
So the role was, technically developer experience, like somebody to focus on the experience of being a developer for this new platform, and like someone that really is front lines, the usability tester of the SDK. And I just thought, like, based on the iTween work we'd done, Surge had not really started at that time, or it wasn't public at that time. Yeah, but just the iTween work alone, I was like, yes, like we need people thinking about these higher level convenience things and like packaging it up. And we got lucky. Like, why did you take? Did I make it sound cool?
Well, I like Bleeding Edge. I think like I had gotten into like, the Oculus DK1 and DK2 and was like, doing all that kind of stuff. And at the time, Bully was a little bit, am I still there? There we go.
Yep.
Bully was slowing down a little bit in clients. We were hitting a dry spell. So I was, getting a little concerned. I have to make sure my family's priority.
You have a small family to take care of too.
Just a small little army. I'm still very good friends with Bully. Carlson and I are, great pals. But I had been pushing so hard on VR, and I was using like a Razer Hydrox.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
K1. So I could at least get, transition with movement and like, pushing like the tablet-based image tracking AR. My canvas was not big enough.
And what was that OSVR? You had like the OSVR headset, like the open source one or whatever. Didn't you?
I had that at one point.
Yeah,
I did.
You've got to have a whole room full of HMD dead HMDs.
36 headsets. I have the basement's got 2 setups. I have a couple setups in here. I have PSVR. I have everything. I have a shelf up here that's just like graveyard. I can't remember where we were going with that one.
Well, so you were already you had already personally were excited by HMDs, and then here I come saying, "Oh, we're building an HMD, and I want you to like help craft the SDK for it." Where you've probably, like all of us, we've all suffered against bad SDKs. Like it was an opportunity to I'm pretty sure that's how I pitched it. I've been kind of trying to keep an eye out for questions. Eric, who's a regular and a friend of ours, yes, Bob still is at Magic Leaps. The other thing we talked about with Anastasia last week was, I had forgotten about the content lineup. So,
oh yeah.
So something we've talked about, multiple times is like how important and how impactful demos were in those early days, and have always been, really. And the funny thing is when Spencer and I first joined, or were thinking about joining the company, we're like, man, the first thing we were going to do is make those demos better. Like, it's a nightmare how they navigate them. They're all run weird. And we never got around to it. And then
they're not even really utilizing the whole near far stuff. It was just far. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like here comes Bob in Bob's way, and he builds a whole framework for the demo, a whole UI for managing the demo, and it's all like maybe less, no offense, Bob, but maybe less than 50 people will ever actually interact with that UI because it's for the demo, proctor for these investor and guest demos. But
we needed that.
But you made it slick and you made it cool looking, you jerk. And
but hundreds of thousands of people saw the other side of that.
And they went smoother. They went smoother because of it. Yeah, I don't discount the value at all. I just, it's like, again, that's why I always wondered, like, does Bob agonize over the details, or does the details just like naturally pop up and like for him? Because some people have that. I think you do.
I can see what I want to get done. I'd say it's funny. Like, I'm not sure how many stories we can dig into, but like, this is a very unknown story. Is we didn't have a lot of not operational, but we didn't have a lot of fully fleshed out hardware, like slices, like input stuff, and those sort of things that were needed at the time when I first started. So I actually hired my dad as the guy who came on.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so my dad contracted.
I wanted to ask about.
I think we can talk about that. So like,
okay.
Because ultimately the controller, internal, and I think even this, people know that the controller was called the totem. Like, for the longest time internally, we called it the totem, and it was the thing you held. And like in the early days, honestly, we used game pads and like Xbox USB controllers and stuff. And we talked about, in parallel, we were talking about the design of what ultimately would become the controller. And we talked about all kinds of different permutations. But yeah, so that was kind of the backstory behind like what like, I'd love to hear your version of it, because I totally forgot about that.
I can even back it up more.
Okay, just real quick, I'll set it up. Learning that you came back after like a week or 2 weeks, back at home, and Bob would do this like back and forth between Florida and his house, and he comes back and he's got this little plastic package with all this like microcircuitry inside and buttons and stuff.
Temple totem.
It's exactly what we need. And we're like, where did this come from, Bob? And
okay, so I have to back it up even further, by the way, because I hired I got my dad on as a contractor, and he had no electrical engineering experience. So let me just back this up to how this actually happened. So while dating my wife, she had this blue tick coonhound that just made noise. I mean, that thing.
I didn't know you were going to tell the bark box story.
Yes, I mean, it got to back up to how Dad got his skill set. So, my wife and I are dating. This dog, I love my wife. This dog just was vocal. So I made a Flash application that analyzed the room noise, and then it would randomly yell at the dog after a certain threshold with our voices. So when we weren't at the house, the dog was still getting that reprimand. And the funny thing was, it just stopped that dog. That dog just didn't bark anymore. I mean, it was just like, cool, I'm good, because I can't get away with it, so I'll just be quiet all the time now. So that disappears. Years later, my dad was like, hey, I think you had a good idea with that. Let's try to make it a product. I'm like, all right, I don't know, Dad, whatever. So my dad goes out and gets Arduino and a 3D printer and just starts mucking around. And I have it somewhere, he puts together an actual self-running unit that analyzes the room. You can record in your own voice, and it would yell at the dog. And I'm sure this has been done. Somebody else has probably done this. But that's how he learned how to do Arduino and soldering and all that kind of stuff. And I always like, if you see a need, fill a need. And I was like, at the time, the version of the W3, which has come up before, it didn't sit on your head. You had to hold that.
Yeah.
So at that point, it was definitely small, but it was just, you had to hold it. And at that point, your input was gone. So I was like, Dad, we got to solve this. So we put together a little box with 2 buttons, and as you're holding it, you could tap those buttons, and we did like 10 or 12 different pieces of hardware that just solved, it just took a vertical slice and said, hey, this is not pretty, but like this might work. And my dad worked for a year with us. It was awesome.
I remember you were taking orders.
Cool.
Yeah, it was great. I was nerding out with my dad. How great is that?
What was really cool about that was that it gave all of us a little more depth into Bob. It's like, holy shit, Bob's dad is helping him. So, like Bob's got a good relationship with his dad. His dad's as geeky and talented as he is, and where did Bob come from? And what was Bob's, childhood like? And oh my God, this is what went through my head. When I heard that your dad and you were working in tandem on a project, it was like, oh, wow.
Well, I mean, it goes back to like almost the spirit of the show, which is like one thing that I think a lot of us have this in common. We're not like the deepest in formal education. We're not the deepest in theory, but we get shit done. Like we just like figure it out and like do things. And like we don't, that one thing that drives me nuts is people that want to sit around and debate like, and we got a little bit of that in our Discord chat. And I have little tolerance for it. Like, I'm just like, are we going to talk about it or are we going to work on it? Like,
yeah, you're right. And the thing is like, I feel like, again, like I'll say it again, I dropped out of college and I work next to people who used to be rocket scientists. Right. And the thing is that like, I think sometimes if you know too many of the rules around the box, you stay in the box. If you don't know even that there is a box, you come at it at a completely different way. And when you're solving things that have never, ever been solved before, I mean, this is just, it's awesome. I mean, like, just always taking a different look at it is just, I love it. It's great. New challenges are fantastic.
It's not a box. It's a 5-dimensional cube.
You focused a lot on those early days about just helping us get forward, working on the demos, helping us get like further and being able to prototype and build content. And then, how did your role evolve? I mean, we talked a little bit with Brian about Interaction Lab and how that started off as a way to support both computer vision and interaction designers, giving them a way to see ideas without going to the content people to build. So like, what happened? How did your role evolve? I mean, originally you were brought on to build demos and test out the SDK. How did that go?
The title never changed. It was going to change, but things kind of got a little hairy recently. But so it was kind of the same, but it turned into more like flexing first turn on of technology. So like, when a new item came on that we could use, it was finding a way to practically use it and utilize it. And that way we could, if you're dog fooding that way, you can very quickly find out what is missing. So that's kind of what that did. But what happened is I was building tests for like the hand input guys and helping, I was building full optics simulation systems for the optics guys and just building all of these tools that I was like, all right, I got to package these up and just give them to our team and other teams because like, why reinvent the wheel when it's already been done? So it was just more about, and it was funny, we turned it into this small little group called Tiny Lab. It was just Brian and I, just, seeing a need and filling a need and making these tools to solve these problems, to give people polished tools to make stuff. And we called it Lego bricks, right? Lego bricks are, that's how you start to get that what, you get the how, because you have the Lego bricks.
So yeah, actually and Brian talked about this a little bit. Where in that did Magic Kit fall? Like the remote control car and the airplane.
Oh, got it.
The helicopter.
So I was actually helping that team with tools to help them solve problems because the key was this was the first time people were actually building things to give away. Mm-hmm. So it had to be clean, it had to be organized, and it had to be robust enough to kind of take a beating from people who were using them. They had to be like legitimate APIs, whatever else. So I was giving them stuff and helping them with the Magic Kit ideas.
Got it.
A fantastic slice of things. And then I decided, look, let's just mature these a little bit more and then put them out for people.
I just wanted because like I still to this day I love the little dune buggy demo because it's simple and it does all these little subtle things. Like in my basement here, I've got a bunch of different rugs and like the car will just ever so slightly bump, and it's got enough suspension to where you see the lights bob. Like, I mean, it's like, again, so I assumed you had something to do with it. I just didn't know how involved you were with it. But I think what you were getting at, I wanted to show this. Like, it sounds like what you have. This is kind of the genesis of the Magic Leap toolkit, right?
Yeah, this is a couple of pieces from it. Yeah, this is the hand thing.
So, again, just if you guys go to Bob's YouTube, you can see all this stuff. And of course, there's a slick audio soundtrack, Bob. And I turned it down a little bit. But like, it's interesting. Like, I didn't even plan for the conversation to go this way, but we kind of took like your background and giving away tools to help people just focus on creation. But at the same time, you're handing people like that polish and that slickness that you introduced into everything, and then that all kind of came together with this role, and that really Magic Leap Toolkit's kind of like that in the spirit of all that. You've taken your experience in building those tools and applied it to a specific platform and a use case, and then gave it away. Like, just here, use this thing. It'll help. So like, I guess we should I just search for Magic Leap Toolkit maybe?
Yeah. It's on our developer portal. Yeah, I think if you can inspire people and empower them, I mean, it's awesome. Yeah, there I am.
Look at your big old face right there on the top of the page. Yeah, I mean, so you've got the coolest thing to me. I mean, you know this. I really tried to hype it up when you put this out, because let's go back. Like, for those that maybe didn't miss the opening of the show, Bob is the unsung hero of XR. He's built tons and tons of stuff that tons and tons of projects use. And then, like, one of the things to me about Magic Leap Toolkit that I feel like was just overlooked, unfortunately, or maybe there's just not enough people talking about it, but like your spatial alignment thing, like, that is just a simple way to get two people in a headset calibrated to each other. And it's Spencer and I have talked about this at least multiple times on this show, about if you want to have people share an experience together, you've got to calibrate to each other in some way. And like, and you've provided that. Like, here it is. And by the way, here's a networking layer as well. So when those people calibrate to each other, they can actually do something together. Like, was this used in like Pancake Pals or any of the stuff that shipped?
No, it wasn't, because I think they were far enough into their cycle that they didn't need another solution. So, which is actually funny here is that, so I think networking is awesome. I think networking is difficult for people who don't know how to do it. And if they're focusing on mixed reality and networking together, it's overload. And Unity's networking package has kind of been in flux for a while now, as far as like what's being deprecated and what's functional. So I kind of gave up and made my own networking platform from the ground up, and then made the spatial alignment stuff. So that way you can just drop in two things. You have a networking platform that just works, and without any calls to any code, your coordinate space aligned to the person in the same room. And another thing too is that there's no lobby, there's no nothing else. It's a different paradigm for networking, where it's like, if you are coexisting, you're automatically connected and sending data back and forth. So anyway, just, those sort of drop-ins. But again, so that you drop those two things in and you have a networking platform and you're good to go.
Yeah. And so actually, this is a good point. Somebody, Todd, brought up in the chat. We should talk a little bit about Mars, and we have talked about Mars before. So now that it's about to be released, so there's a couple things actually to touch on here. Augmented World Expo is this week, which is very weird for me because I left Magic Leap in April-ish, May-ish of 2016, and my kind of first event after years of representing Magic Leap but just being myself was AWE. And I've always loved AWE, Augmented World Expo, as a conference because it's very small. And it's a lot of the people I follow online and people that I know are like, it was like kind of a summer, like a kickoff to summer camp get together thing. And honestly, I hardly ever went to the talks. I mostly hung out, met up with people, and I've gone every year since I left. And it's the first year it was like, oh, just me getting out of my Magic Leap turtle shell and just getting re-exposed to the world. And the other at the time, it was also like Spencer was still at Magic Leap, so it was my chance to get back to see Spencer again, and during that event. And then like the next year we were launching Torch and raising funding, and like it's just always been a part of my routine. It's like one of the few things I go to. I'll go to San Francisco during GDC, but I don't actually go to GDC. I just want to meet with people and see people because I know they're there. And so it's kind of weird this year because there's no AWE at Santa Clara Convention Center, and they're doing it all online. And the other weird part about it, Kent By hosted an impromptu kind of VR hangout this week because even though, I mean, and look, I don't, the AWE thing has grown and grown and grown so much even since, and it's been around for like 10 years or no, longer than 10 years. And I've only been a part of it for a few. So they've grown into this big thing. And I can't imagine how difficult it is for the organizers like Ori and Tom and those guys to turn it into an online only event really last minute, real short notice when this is your only like big event of the year. And they have,
it's also really hard for, like we're all sitting in front of our computer screens a lot of the time. And I'm hearing from you that one of the things that you really love is the actual kind of meet space meeting of the folks that you talk to all the time online. And now that's not available.
Which is weird for me to say.
It's
weird for me to say out loud because I'm a total introvert. But like something about AWE, like if I know people, I'm comfortable. Like, but I'm not sad that I'm not meeting a ton of new people. So, so yeah, it's been kind of weird for me because it's been in like for, it would have been an interesting time for me to go, and so they've transitioned to online only. It's pretty much focused on the presentations. And honestly, I didn't go to those that often. And it wasn't why I went. I went to the expo floor and I would go to talks to support friends. Like I would go to, different people's talks and just be there. So anyway, so AWE is kind of, but I mean, I think there's still a lot of interest. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about it, and I think they're doing a good job of giving people content. I'm kind of disconnected from it this year. But anyway, all that is to say, one of the big announcements, and Bob said something about it, I've said something about it. I'll switch it over. Is we've talked about Mars before, but now Mars is officially going to release in May, I think, or on Monday. Which is May, right? No, wait. No, it's not May anymore. So, I had early peeks at Mars. So I guess I can say this now. I was under an NDA but I honestly just didn't have time to really dig into it. It is Unity's like, big investment into AR in particular. Like everything else has been kind of loosely XR tied to VR, like HMDs, alternative devices, but Mars really is about like serious, legit AR problems. Like I'm trying to build a thing. We've talked about this before on the show. I'm trying to build a thing that works in any room. My biggest concern with Mars is that I'm not sure how many people have this sophisticated of a problem yet. I think they will. I think people that live and breathe this stuff and like are trying to push it will appreciate what it's trying to do. But like, I think you've got to be in that headspace to really understand, because it is not a simple, we've talked a little bit about it before. It's not a simple thing. Like they're the first ones really tackling this problem that came up all the time during Magic Leap days. And it comes up frequently for anybody that's doing more than just simple object on a tabletop or type experiences. It's like
room scale.
Like really having content respond to the real world and building it in such a way that it'll reliably work, which is really important when you're building production stuff. And like crafting the experience around those parameters. It's a very parameterized way to think about building content. Like you're building up a quote unquote data set of the environment, and you've got content that responds to specific types of data. So
okay, so for the relatively techie art folks who don't completely understand what's going on here, what does this give us that is not already available through programmer, artist, sound person kind of team?
All right, so hang on.
How does this?
So before Paul answers, I'm sure he's got tons of information on this as well.
No,
So,
I was hoping you would answer.
Yeah, I wanna hear, yeah.
Okay, so what I have noticed for all these years of doing this is that sometimes the technology you give a creator isn't helpful. Help is only helpful when it's helpful, really. Like, for instance, like I can't tell you how many times meshing, which is when you reproduce the world into a digital object, a physical object in theory in a game engine, that you can, throw physical objects against, or have occlusion where like the real world blocks the digital world. So meshing is a technology that is provided by, the technologies we work on, the headsets
it's provided by the hardware, not by Unity.
Right. So yeah, but it's a tool, right? It's a technology. However, nobody knows what to do with it. It is just this organic living mesh that's always changing, and nobody from a content standpoint knows how to leverage it in any way, really. So what's more important is giving people canvases. This is into the Lego brick idea. If you give people a canvas, they can start executing things. And what I'm seeing so far in Mars is that it allows you to take that mess of stuff, that living, breathing mesh, and it gives you, logical canvases and, in smart locations that you can say, oh, I get it. That's where something should live. Or this is how, these are the rules that can exist.
Shine off of that wall, or I should bounce off of that Devon, armrest. Right.
It's interesting. The most important way to make an artist powerful, right, is give them a leash. Right? Like if
totally.
So
no, we've talked about this before.
Yeah, but
or constraints. Constraints is another way.
No, let's say that one more time, because I really want that quote. The best way. Say it again.
The best way to leverage an artist is to give them a leash, or put them on a leash rather.
Yes.
But I'm an artist too, so this is nothing negative about that. But like, if you give somebody a limited thing to work within, they're usually more creative, as opposed to just come up with an idea for me, as opposed to, hey, here's some rules. And as long as you have those rules and the constraints kind of keep you focused, you can do way more amazing things when it's just open-ended. Like when it's open-ended, you get overwhelmed. You get, you start tripping on yourself. You can't.
This is what we bumped up against when we first came into Magic Leap. That everything was a freaking billion polygons, and everyone was
and they're
throwing polys and textures at.
Well, or like the other, I mean, we have talked about this before. Like the inclination of someone who is not familiar with that conundrum, which is like, if you give an artist, like, let's take it to a traditional artist. You give an artist a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper and say, make me some art. It's like, what? Like,
well, hold on. I know the answer to this one. They stare at it for like 8 hours trying to figure out what to do, because it's terrifying.
Yes.
You're concerned with what they want from you.
You don't have constraints. It's like artists work within constraints. Yeah, and so like the one of the things we had to knock. This was it was never explicitly said, but when we came into Magic Leap, it was the general idea, like, was, well, and this is a naive idea, is, well, the reason why past interactive digital content has been, the reason why we don't have real-time Pixar stories is because the technology's not been powerful enough or accessible enough. And it's like, no, that is not the problem. So one of the original assumptions or theories of Magic Leap was, we now have the ability to present visual content in such a way that is almost indistinguishable from the real world within certain parameters. So now artists can now fully realize their it's almost like it's a theory that artists are always compromising because like, this was the best I could do given the paints and canvas I was given. If I only had better paints, but that's not how it works. How it works is it's like, given this set of paints and canvas you've given me, I'm going to see how far I can push it. Now I'm inspired to like see what I can do with this. And people,
so I got to say in 2000, no, I'm sorry, in 1993, when Virtua Fighter came out,
heck yeah.
I was absolutely blown away by the precise positioning of each one of the vertices of each one of those characters and the way that they animated. Like they knew, it was very Japanese. It was like they knew exactly where to put that one little place, you know, that one little that little vert and exactly like it was fantastic. And that was working within the parameters. My first 3D car was 300 polygons, and I had to do it in BSP. There was no Z buffer.
If you go back to the Flash development days, we had to make a jaw-dropping multimedia experiences in 400K, right? And like we did it because like we you could maximize those limitations. But yeah, I mean, anyway. So,
that's Josh in the chat had a good point. It was like, we could actually talk about the Unreal Engine 5 demo. It's like pretty soon, photorealism is on the precipice, if not already here, of achievable. It doesn't make better content. Like it doesn't. No, artists aren't trying to recreate the real world, like to like photon level accuracy. Like there is that level of storytelling and polish and constraint and that's where the beauty is, right?
Wonderful tweet the other day. Somebody had a GIF of someone taking a cube and subdividing it and subdividing it and subdividing it and subdividing it until it just turned into this like black mass of triangles. And they're like, I'm ready for UE5. You know?
What? I shared the Hard Times article that says the world is worried that UE5 is going to deplete the world of triangles available triangles because it's all we need.
Before we get too far away.
And one more second, Josh. That was 2 triangles, so drink twice. Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, going back to Mars really quick. Going back to Mars. Oh man, where was I going to go with this now? You made me lose it.
Sorry.
Well, we're talking about the canvas of the real world.
So all the things that are happening in Mars are it's very smart and it's very much turning things into canvases. And a developer can make those tools. I mean, I'm not discrediting it anyway. But the fantastic thing that what Unity does is they always are fantastic at making that tool that's going to be usable in kind of any. It's very flexible, very robust tool. And instead of people making these things themselves, now we can go, okay, cool. Now we're all speaking the same language. Let's go ahead and use Mars, and we're all going to use these different. It's unifying the language across the board, which is just such an ideal thing because again, we get the how out of the way.
Right. Well, right. Yeah. Or another way to.
Now, a question that I have about that is that you have this kind of like across the board way of doing a thing, right? Which you're just talking about. And so let's say my programmer wants to modify that. Is using Mars, like, can you mod this thing? Or is it like, the things I've downloaded from the App Store that have pissed Paul off so much, like, that you can't modify.
No, I think
you can add.
I think it has the opposite. My take on it is I think it has the opposite problem of that, which is actually so flexible and so like it's actually not so black box and prepackaged that people are going to have a hard time getting started with it unless they provide good examples and demos and things to work with. But like based on what like I said, I had a little bit of an early peek at it. I really haven't had time to put it through its paces. And like just reading the documentation was like, wow, I'm having a tough time tracking everything that's going on here. But all that said, I think it's a good thing. And if nothing else, there's something out there to talk against. It's like, it's kind of like what we just said, like with UE5. Now that like UE5 and Dreams and all these crazy engines are out there, we can stop saying that fidelity is a problem and still get back to craft. And it's kind of the same thing with Mars. Like we can stop saying, if only somebody would build a tool that would turn a real physical environment into a canvas I can work against. Well, that exists. So there it is. If it doesn't meet your needs,
now what's your excuse?
yeah. Or how could it be better? But at least it's a starting. But that's how early these days are. At least it's a starting point.
Right.
I did want to come back to, I don't know how related. I mean, it's just kind of related to us loving on Bob, but I did want to show like some of your more recent work.
I saw this in my tweet.
Yeah. So I wanted to show this one, this real time. I'm going to let the music play a little bit. So Bob, this is so Bob. I'll turn it. What are we looking at, Bob?
Okay, so since this was years before Mars was, on the radar for something, this was a way to visualize additive display content, which obviously Magic Leap's platform is what it uses, within Unity itself real time, so you could actually make adjustments to how things would feel. So this is basically like a real world version of Mars, sort of like way before that conversation ever occurred. So what's happening here is I actually take these photos around the area, centering on a single point with a phone using ARKit or ARCore, doesn't matter. And I embed into the image all the coordinate data that I need for like where the camera is and everything else, bring it into Unity, and actually like the camera, what's it called? Intrinsics. That's loud, man. You should turn it down a little bit.
Well, I had the chat asking me what music, so I wanted to bump them out a little bit.
What I is I now know the perspective and the angles of the camera with the image. So now I know how content. The camera is just moving a camera basically at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No.
Look at the top.
Yeah. So first of all, I apologize, chat. You're about to hear some effing music, but like just even what you said about additive displays, I've got it froze here. Like I just want to show, like you can see like the tabletop slightly through the dimmer parts of the content, which is a good thing to be able to visualize, right? Because if this content's ultimately going to be viewed on an optical view through display, you'd really like to see it as close to how the user's going to see it as possible. The closer you can pull that into the tool, the more you can iterate on it and make it better, right? So yeah, hold on, chat. Sorry,
actually hold on, Paul. Bob, how did you derive camera position from image? Did you do a little photogrammetry there, or what was your how did you get your camera positioning based on camera backplate? I'm assuming that's camera backplate, right?
Yeah, that's the actual camera. That's the actual photo that was taken.
So it's the backplate that's behind everything.
Right. So the actual the mobile application I built for this, you would set a cube in the world on one of the planes that ARKit or ARCore discovered, and keep that in view, and it would give you the relative offset of the real physical camera to that digital object, and that's how you use
ARKit to derive the 3D position of the camera in Unity.
Yeah, and then the camera intrinsics can be copied over, and therefore the digital camera inside of Unity will match what ARKit or ARCore was able to snap it. Thank you. Yeah, this was years ago.
So I can't play the music while you guys talk because of the echo problem.
Oh.
So I'm gonna ask you all to shut up for just a minute. I'm gonna unmute the system audio. We're not allowed to talk, so
hit us, Paul.
Everyone can hear the music. By the way, you can all watch this on YouTube later. Okay, hold on.
Okay, all right.
Okay. All right.
I'm imagining Bob's kids going down into the basement like at 2:00 in the morning asking for a glass of water, and that's going on. He's like got, 17 different monitors, and he's got an HMD on his head.
Well, the reason why I thought it, we literally did just with last week, we talked like in the conversation about the impact of music, and I was like, Bob always throws some music in there that just like, so what you were saying earlier in the show was, so do you produce the video and then you sit back and you said colors, you associate music with, so like when you look at this, are you looking at the color of the content?
What's that?
Like, are you looking for a beat? Like, do you produce the video and then think about like, try to time a beat to like what you're showing? Like, what is your process for even making a video like this?
I usually capture the footage first. And I usually kind of keep my movements and everything else on some kind of a tempo of some sort. Like if I'm doing a screen capture or whatever else, I'm trying to keep a tempo of some sort in my head. And that way, whenever I do find a song, kind of cuts and changes kind of match up a little bit, which is kind of like a way of cheating with that. But once the video is done, for some reason, I can just see a color out of the tone of the music, of the visuals, and then just and a sound is so important, right? Like when like you go back to Virtual Fighter, right? Like the visuals by today's standards are garbage. However, like audio has had the same impact and fidelity for years, right? And as soon as like visuals have the audio to them, I mean they become real. I mean, I know it's usually the last step in things, but I mean, spatialized audio just makes things. I mean, honestly, when things hit and that audio hits, that's where the real comes from.
Oh yeah, the takedown hits in Virtua Fighter were not because of the visuals; they were because of the audio. They were because they hit just right, and you were like, oh God, that was visceral. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's why I always put the videos on there because. I mean, the songs on there because just trying to inspire.
So you got this song in your head, and you're walking around your thing with your iPad, and it's 3:00 in the morning, and your kids are asking you for water, and you're walking around, and you've got this song in your head, and you're moving to the beat of that song, so that you can cut it later to the beat of that song.
That way, whatever. Yeah, when the song's on there, even if it's not on the actual beats for the actual changes or events that I'm doing, it'll kind of feel like it's got the tempo of the song because I sort of did things in the same sort of framing.
Right.
It just works out.
It's so good. Okay, so Paul has left us, and oh no, there he is. He's come back.
What? No, I've been here the whole time.
Yeah, I just leave. Paul actually just leaves too. Yeah, look at him. There he goes. Well, Bob, there's so many things I want to talk to you about on this thing, but there's things that we can't talk about, and we did so many fun little things like the armored science fiction armored transport in the parking lot that would be so great to talk about, but I don't think we can talk about those things. So I just want to say that it's freaking awesome to see you again, and you are looking quite buff, my friend.
Thank you.
You have been rocking
he's
the
he's a
COVID press ups.
He's the Bowflex commercial. He's a walking Bowflex commercial. Hold on. I thought we'd have a few more. Does anybody have any questions? Because we got a couple more. Bob, are you okay on time? Do you need to go?
Yeah, I can go. I can go forever.
I mean, I could go for at least another beer because I got a little rest.
I have another half a bottle of wine. So
I'm up for talking.
I think oh wait, so how much have you been following have you just been I know you've done some VR stuff. Have you just been so consumed by Magic Leap work? Have you been doing any other projects? Like, have you been dabbling in AR Foundation or any are you just really focused on work?
Side quest?
Yeah, I mean, I try to stay current. I haven't really taken massive dives into things outside of Magic Leap, just because there's been so much to do and so much to kind of encapsulate and explore. So I've really been in the mix. But I mean, I'm up to speed on all hardware. I have the Quest here, I have the Rift S here, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So at least from a content standpoint, I have done some. What's that?
Do you have the fingers? Do you have the what is it, the
Hand tracking.
Alexa, the Alexa thing? Or no,
What?
the Half-Life Alex.
Oh, Half-Life.
Oh,
Alex.
Knuckles. You're doing Knuckles.
Knuckles.
I don't have Knuckles. I was gonna put in a purchase order for that, but I didn't. Yeah,
I was trying to decode
Oh,
Spencer
my God.
going Alexa and doing this with his hands. I'm like, what are you talking
Alexa, bring me a face crab.
We do have
So
a,
I got Half-Life Alex, and it's tremendous. I played it for 2 nights, and then Beth came down with symptoms that were in line with what's currently going around.
Oh.
So we had to put her in the basement, so I didn't use that headset. So I was like, all right, I haven't gotten back to it, but I really do want to.
so we do
She's better
have
now.
we have couple questions. First of all, I'm going to give Estella gets Peanut Gallery priority. So her question is, if she gives you some tilt brush art, can you do some crazy shit with it? And maybe you guys can talk about it in the chat.
How would she hand it off? Like as
You
as
can
an
export
OBJ?
FBX from tilt brush. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I can find out something to do with that.
Think
Did you have anything in
about it.
mind, or do
Think
you
it-
just want to try to put into a project?
I just want to let's just put it out there, and you two.
I need a leash. Remember?
Yeah. Well, Estella's was our first guest on the show. She's incredible, and an incredible VR artist and artist in general. And she's very active in our Discord chat. By the way, it's only an hour in, and I'd like to encourage everyone to like and subscribe. This is how serious. We've had people ask Spencer, like, where are you taking this show? And we're like, down the drain.
You didn't even play the intro. I didn't
Oh,
even hear the
crap.
intro.
Let's just do it.
Oh, intro.
Which one do you want?
Reboot.
Here.
XR Talk with Paul and Spencer.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, we're just completely out of order. We're thinking outside the box.
Yes, there's no box.
Todd wanted to know, like, for spatial alignment, if you had to port the spatial, I'm gonna use his words or give him words. If you were to port the spatial alignment thing from Magic Leap Toolkit to Quest, would it work? Like, as far as like conceptually, if you had pass through video, you've got 6-off tracking.
So the way that it works is it uses actually a similar offset solution that I did in that video that we saw with the way to visualize additive display work in Unity. It's basically an offset from an anchor, right? So that used an anchor that was set on a plane. So spatial alignment uses our PCFs, the persistent coordinate frames, which HoloLens has their anchors. I can't remember
Spatial
what they're
anchors.
called. But anyway, Azure spatial anchors. So anyway, and Google AR Kit has them. Anyway,
AR
it's
Kit
all-
is world anchors, and AR
Anchor.
Core is
Anyway,
something
so to
anchors.
explain what they are, basically, it's a way of keeping track of a point in space, persistent throughout application launches and everything else. So it's like an identifiable spot. There's all kinds of different techniques
An
of
interest point.
an interest point. Yeah, and if you put something like that should be physically there, it'll always be there. Anyway, so spatial alignment uses that in the background to kind of get the offsets to then realign.
So the
coordinate
Quest would
space.
need some sort of persistent point.
Yeah, I think the
mechanism.
way I would do it with that is like maybe touching surfaces and like doing plane intersections.
I always
that
wanted to
kind of
do
thing.
back in the early Magic Leap days before we had PC. We never had PCF when I was there, and I always wanted to do like a visual thing, like give each person like a chopped off or like a pyramid and say make a cube. So like you and then like pull the trigger or like confirm.
yeah.
You like do something visual that you're both like you have to talk to the other person, but mutually agree that or have 2 spheres and put your sphere like some sort of like UX-y way to calibrate 2 people to each other. But I never really saw anybody do that well.
before PCFs and anchors and all that kind of stuff, the way I did it was I actually created a solution where if you, this only works on pass through, but if you, it's a 4-step process. So you focus on a point in the world and you save a ray at that point, right? An infinite ray. Then you go to a different spot and you look at the exact same object or item, and then you get 2 rays. The closest point between those rays will be a point in space, right? And it's actually pretty accurate to do it that way. And then choose one more spot and do the same thing. At that point, you have a root and a north, basically a forward vector. And if you have other people do those exact same steps, you've consolidated coordinate spaces without having to do any kind of fancy stuff. So that's how I did it early on.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, I have a maybe more artistic, simple way to do it. You have a pizza box on your hand, and like what Paul was saying, is I just walk up to Paul, and Paul puts his pizza box next to my pizza box, and they connect. But
the
we're like,
the trick is the problem is I can't see your content and you can't see mine. So there's got to be some sort of human to human calibration in that. Like that's what I was saying. Like you could do things like
touch hands.
Well,
I mean, after you use a bunch of this stuff.
Well,
but that device would need to see that hand too.
Yeah, so maybe with the Quest does have the hand tracking, but then I don't know.
Touch fingers together. I don't know.
Fingertips.
I mean, I would maybe touch surfaces, like familiar surfaces, and that would give you 2 rays, like I was saying with the visual thing. If you touch the same 2 surfaces, basically, when those rays, the closest point that those rays connect or those planes connect, you could call that a point.
An image marker would also an image marker would replace the persistent coordinate frame.
But the image marker would have to be on some kind of known distance from you. Like you'd have to both put it in the.
No, as long as both people have the same tracker and they're looking for the orientation of the image, where it is relative to
scale.
you, and the scale.
Same scale.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a question that's kind of come up in my head recently. I have an iPad 2020, and I go scan my room, right? So now I have this 3D mesh of my room. So I've got the interactive bounce light occlusion mesh for my room. I want to share that with you, Bob, and you're in your garage. Professionally front lit with a ring light, very dark background, very attractive looking.
A big enough garage to hold those guns he's packing.
and so I want to share my environment with you. The only way that you can truly enjoy my environment and walk around it is if you are in a completely empty environment. If you're in a short little space like where Paul is right now, then you can't get up and like walk to my couch because you're going to bump into your own desk.
Right. So there's a couple ways to do that. So, I mean, one of the things is, a guardian in that situation would need to be the mesh of the real world needs to kind of like appear as you walk towards like a table. So you kind of go, hey, that's not there, basically. Like the bridge did that. The occipital bridge did that, right? But hang on. So, but what you're talking about is the idea of like locomotion issues in VR, right? Like you can't walk that far, right?
Right.
So what you would have to kind of do is kind of drag it. You'd have to kind of like pick it up and move it more over here, and then you can walk over to that spot. So I mean, I think you could locomotion it a bit, but no, I mean, unless it was the same exact dimensions physically, you couldn't walk around it.
You could, but I mean, you could pull the real world geometry in and occlude.
Right. So you have the host's real world geometry becomes
some sort of representation.
Yeah, you could do the
texture map
small scale.
Okay.
And then you could dollhouse it,
You could just wait until the pandemic dies down and invite Bob over to your actual living room, and then he can walk around it.
I'm in.
By the way, side story: when we escaped Florida. When I left Magic League, we escaped Florida. We did a big cross-country road trip, and Bob's house was one of the stops on the road trip.
My last house.
And,
yes.
Bob's house?
Yeah, and Josh.
Yep.
It just so happened Josh was doing his road trip too, and we all converged at the house.
Me and I never came by. I'm
little side story.
Wait a minute. I invite everybody to cookouts all the time.
I don't ever remember.
wasn't anything
I don't ever
special.
remember getting
Okay,
an
cool.
invite to that.
Yeah.
So Cammy was asking. So Spencer, this is your moment. This is your moment.
Visual scripting.
I have a lot of.
Cammy was
I will
asking.
take this one.
Cammy was asking about Bolt. So we talked.
Oh my God.
We talked about Bolt 2 weeks ago. So Unity bought Bolt. That's how I heard of them. I had honestly never heard of them. And yeah, you had heard of them?
Yeah, they've been in the asset store for a very long time.
Oh, never heard of them.
Yeah.
Unity bought them.
I purchased Bolt, and what I found about Bolt was that in order to use Bolt past the super great, excellent tutorials that they have, is you really have to have a programmer head. You can't just have an art head. You got to have that left brain in there, or the right brain. We forget which one it is, but I think it's the left brain. But you've got to have that ability to think about this thing affects this thing, and
data.
I mean, I made a hilarious soccer game from a demo that they had up there, and I did their version of it first, and I was like, oh, well, what if I have more guys, and I'm gonna add some different physics materials and put big higher walls on it, and shit was going crazy all over the place, and it was really, really fun. I totally got the love that you code monkeys get from building a thing.
Iteration.
Well, but so yeah, I mean, you
yeah.
still have to know about like data types and data flow, and like
Yeah, right.
what it really gets rid of. So
Helps me
for
a lot.
Cammy, we happen to know Cammy, and we know that she has an engineering background and writes code. So like she can probably
Oh yeah,
deal with
it'd
that.
be great for
But
Cammy.
like really,
Yeah.
really, what visual scripting is really doing for you is getting rid of the weird tedium of coding. Like,
For that muscle memory.
yeah, why do I have to have a semicolon? Why do I have to like that type of stuff? And
Yes.
but you still have to know about like this idea of inputs and outputs and data models and structures
But
and stuff.
is that
Right,
really
you have to-
bad?
No. But I'm just saying. But let's.
Bolt is a very Bob Berkebile
Spencer-
kind of coding, scene.
Spencer wants his mind map to turn into code. So let's
But here's the
be
thing.
clear.
I mean, I don't think you're ever going to get a silver bullet for that. Like my 7-year-old and 9-year-old go through Scratch, which is, it's very
It's
similar
teaching you
to-
those muscles.
right but,
logic.
you have to get that logic
Yep.
sort of idea of like connecting those dots, and that's you have to have that. You can't
So
skip.
I gotta say, it was fantastic, and what I would love to see, and people are gonna hate this, but the way I learned to code HTML and CSS was through what the hell was that thing back in the 90s? It was Visual HTML, Dreamweaver. And so I used Dreamweaver, and then I would move a block. And
See what
then I would
happened,
see-
right?
Huh?
You see what happened, right?
Yeah.
Right, and I would see what the code did. And I was like, oh, shit. And so after a while, I stopped using Dreamweaver, and I just started coding. And then, running it and coding and running it. And it got me from the visual to the text. And I was kind of hoping that there would be a little bit more of that in Bolt. And I did. I so far, I've only been through like 3 tutorials, but I haven't seen this is what it looks like in C# when you do this.
Yeah.
That's what would be super helpful for me as a kind of visual learner to see, like, I did this and I really like what that's happening. Okay, what's going on over here?
So, update to a past question. We've never done this before, but like this is an ongoing question. So first of all, Cammy, who asked the Bolt question, really thinks you should collaborate with Estella, and then.
All right.
And then Estella brought up the fact, and I forgot about this, that she could give you access to her Scream VR artwork, which was her recreation of the Scream in VR. So little known fact, Bob Berkebile is a horror nut.
That's
and
all I watched.
he only watches horror movies, and he makes VR haunted houses, and he makes AR scary experiences. So if we can make Scream VR into some sort of horror thing, I think I think we're starting to find the constraints that we need that we need for this collaboration.
Back in the day, I took a carpet that I used actually in a bunch of my original or early AR videos, and I put a dead guy on it, right? Because I was trying to use real world scale. And at that point, my oldest son, who's now 19.
What, Andrew?
He's 19.
Jeez.
Yeah. I showed it to him. I really wasn't using the father filter on that. Like, hey, look at this dead guy on the ground, by the way, young kid. He wouldn't go near the carpet ever again. He would like step around it.
And the fact that Bob's laughing at this should tell you something about the dark side of Bob Berkebile.
Okay, so just really quick, I think that that what Estella's piece was The Scream.
Yes.
By Edvard Munch.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, that one.
But I'm wondering, like, I'm thinking if it's a 3D representation, leave it up to Bob to twist it into something actually scary. Yeah, yeah.
I'm on it.
So we're getting there. We're getting there. That's an ongoing conversation. Our friend Ben, he's been in the chat contributing. This is such a big question. I'm gonna smear it across our faces. He's talking about the widening gap between Unreal and Unity. Unreal, we talked a little bit about this in past episodes. Unreal is kind of known as like the graphics heavyweight, the fidelity heavyweight, and by extension of that extends into CAD and architectural stuff. Unity has always leaned a little bit more mobile, a little more indie. Like, do you think they're going to keep kind of forking, like diverging on those paths? But like, I mean, like Unity is actually pushing really hard to get into like virtual production. Like I actually feel like Unity's moving away from that indie type of thing a little bit. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they really want to make sure they widen their web a lot and not just be hooked in like the game DNA, which they're so incredibly strong and good at. But like, yeah, the vehicle visualization stuff with the ray tracing and everything else like that. Yeah, just like broadening as a creative canvas rather than just a game development, tool set. So yeah.
And I don't know if Unreal. I mean, the thing is like I used to. I'll be honest. I used to kind of slam Unreal, which is weird because, first of all, my preferred programming language has always been C++. So you think I would be a huge Unreal nut, and my mind is wired to a Unity way of doing things, so it's hard to break out of that. But I've often kind of put down Unreal a little bit for not being really the leader on mobile and XR. But the truth is, especially during lockdown,
they were slow.
Yeah. But the thing is like, since Spencer mentioned his 2020 LiDAR iPad, I bought his old junky 2018 iPad, I think, and and I've been playing a crap ton of Fortnite, and like Fortnite looks and runs beautifully on an iPad. So like but the thing is Unreal. The difference is I think Unreal doesn't go out. The Unreal Engine can work well on any hardware. It's proven. Fortnite alone is proof. But Unreal doesn't go out of their way to help other people get to that level of fidelity or proficiency with their tech on mobile. Not that I've observed. It just seems like out of their wheelhouse. But it is an interesting trend that we've seen. Eric asks if there could be some more videos on how to do things with MLTK, the Magic Leap Toolkit. This is how he's making a simple network app with an ML1 and a phone. So like, is there like, just a request to make make some more examples?
Transmission's a network platform inside of MLTK that I built. It's cross-platform. So basically you can, iPhone connection network set up to a Magic Leap device or whatever else. But yeah, I think that would be great. I think it'd be cool. We initially started doing developer days where we were actually building applications using the Lego bricks that were presented within MLTK. But priorities are a little bit changed right now. So I think that would be good to get to that. I think it'd be great to show how to build applications with those. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll keep that in the back of the head.
Flavio says, Bob. I assume you know who that is.
What's up, Flavio? I miss you, man.
I'll just throw that out there. Let's see if we got any other. Oh man, Estella's already. She's talking about Scream. Yep. I think it's all. Yeah.
Did you ever see that horror thing I did with a flashlight and on Magic Leap? That behind the light thing?
I did, but is it on your YouTube?
It's on Twitter.
Oh, Bob.
I don't think I ever put it
Oh,
on YouTube.
Bob.
Yeah.
Well,
I'd have to scroll through Twitter for that one.
We'll have to find it on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, you just have, you really do just have this incredible body of work. So like, if this show accomplishes anything, hopefully a few more people know about Bob Berkebile, Surge. We don't talk about iTween. Don't even search for iTween. The Magic Leap Toolkit, but like it's really funny. Like I'd like to think that once we've taught people how to tune into Bob style content, they'll start to notice it. It's like one of those things where like once you mention like, you know what, Bob does put a soundtrack on every video. He everything he shows is really slick. Everything's got these little moments of polish. You'll notice and you'll learn to hate him like I do. And that's really my goal.
Bob is really kind of the original floaty spinny.
Truly. Absolutely. If iTween had floaty spinny, I would just give Spencer that. Oh, Josh had a quick question. Like that, what can you talk about that was your favorite thing you worked on at Magic Leap so far? Because you're still there.
Oh man. I mean, gosh, I have built thousands. I think I have a 70 gig Google Drive of videos I've put together. Oh my God, there's so many things. I think I'm trying to filter through what can talk about and can not talk about.
Right?
I would say.
I know.
I think that maybe my favorite thing would probably be all the hardware that my dad and I made. I think because it was an awesome bonding moment. We made some great stuff. My mom helped do some sewing for some straps and like some 6-off tractors and all that kind of stuff. But like that's how you solve a problem. So I think the stuff that I did with my dad that was so scrappy was just those memories so great.
Yeah, we told that story, but like I don't know if we didn't really talk about, or were you just trying to avoid the specifics? I mean the Temple controller was like buttons that people could use to it was actually back. It was back around the time that the Gear VR was out, right? And and the only like the Gear had the little touchpad and you could tap. And what we had at the time was a sort of wearable thing, but not really, and a gamepad. And what that particular device did was it gave us some sort of attached, at least confirmation or input on the headwear. So you didn't have to hold, so you could be sort of hands-free, but you could also like look at something and tap to confirm and then let go.
So I have a question of as far as like the technology that went through that. Like you were in charge of SDK at that point, Paul, and Bob was making the thing with his dad, and his mom sewing parts of it, which is just even better. Was there like Bob, did you utilize the SDK, or did you just call Paul and say, what do I send? You know, and like was there actually an SDK at that point, or
no? So it was all doing. My dad used Teensy, which is a very small Arduino, and we just used serial port, conversation back and forth. So I was always
there's like a Unity plugin.
Yeah. So I was looking at I can read the port, read data coming in, and send port back out again. So it was all bypassing that. Which was cool because then you could use it on different platforms and whatever else. Whatever could consume that port data, you were good to go with.
Right.
Because we weren't running through custom. I mean, there was some custom. We're basically running on top of pretty standard Linux, like in a PC for for the compute. So we didn't really need the SDK for that yet. The SDK at that time was really about getting the frame out to the special display stuff. but the compute part was really where the SDK really became critical, was when the compute started getting more and more custom, and it had to talk. And I mean, about that time is when we started talking to Unity. I mean, just so people know how this stuff works. I mean, like if you're building a new piece of hardware and you're like, yeah, you've got to set up strategic relationships with Unity and Epic and all the engines, and say, we want to have like a nice integration into your engine, and you've got to work with them. And so this was a little bit before all that gets more complicated. And we did have some special input and output stuff, but the core computing part was pretty vanilla PC Linux stuff. And so as long as whatever he did in Unity could run, it would just work, which was actually cool. Like, it allowed us to test a bunch of weird stuff at a time when, like, if we didn't have that. Okay, this is Eric would like to know if he should use Surge instead of iTween. Would you?
Yes.
You know what?
Eric, yes.
They can both exist in one project. So every other line, I want you to call Surge in one line and then iTween the next. Just have at it. Make it a big old sandwich of calls.
And and send in lots of support requests when your iTween Surge project.
Take a screenshot of your garbage collection and let me see that.
We've got Randall and Jurgen here. Like, Bob's just being too modest. The Temple controller was awesome, and that it was a very slicked and polished DLL that was used for the Temple controller.
Thanks, George. Miss you too, man.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, like, I want to keep seeing your. So, are we going to see more stuff from Major League Toolkit? Are you still kind of grinding on that, or?
Can you talk about that?
If you can't talk about it, that's fine. That's fine.
That's cool.
Can you make some videos for Eric on how to use the?
Can you do that dance again?
How about this? Nothing will ever stop me from making tools for people.
Yeah,
so,
there you go. That's fair.
You will get things. You will get Lego bricks from Bob in any way.
That is great. Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, like hopefully again, like I say this all the time, but this is what this show is about. It's like people actually working on this stuff and talking nuts and bolts, talking a little theory, but like answering some questions. And I thought, I knew Bob was going to be a great one. So it also saved me from having to hunt down a guest this week. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
The only thing we didn't talk about what you want for your poster frame, buddy, which is where.
That's right, because we had to do this.
I could put all 36 headsets on real quick and just see how that ends up.
Actually, yeah. Wait, actually, here's your challenge.
Uh-oh.
How many HMDs can you put on your head right now? Doesn't have to be 37. And then and then you just stand in the middle, and we're going to look at you like you're weird. I got to look this way. I always forget.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll have no audio at that point. So
That's okay.
I'll be running blind.
That's okay.
gosh.
How are we going to tell him to pause? Well, you'll just have to stand there like an
I
idiot.
need hand signals.
Stand there for 5 seconds.
Oh,
right,
thank you, Estella. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Bob. While we wait for Bob, I'd like to encourage everyone to like and subscribe. You go to watch.xrtalk.net. Hold on.
XR Talk with Paul and Spencer.
You can also go to chat.xrtalk.net. And
There's one.
There's just one. One's fine.
Okay. He's got the ML.
And you can join our Discord.
Okay.
The problem is he's in that dark room and all the hardware is black. Oh, you got the view. Are those the new Vuzix? Wait a minute. Maybe we should keep this show going.
What?
I want to talk about this. Oh, I can see myself in his glasses. Wait. Okay.
Right,
hold on. Wait. I gotta look this way. I think we got to give him hands. We got to give him hand signals. He can't hear us. All right. Thanks, everyone. We're gonna sign off. We'll be back next week. We'll find another awesome guest or not. Eventually, Spencer and I have to do an episode. Yes, I wanted to ask about those.
These are just the NVIDIA.
Oh,
3D
they're
vision.
shutter glass.
Yeah.
I thought they were the new Vuzix. I was like, we need to talk about that.
Old school right here. It's still awesome.
Nice. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bob.